Hi, everyone, and hello, Jennifer. I will be introducing us today. I'm Celeste with BarMax. So first, I want to welcome everyone to the BarMax webinar on the Mpre, the Multi-State Professional Responsibility Exam. I also want to introduce Jennifer Carr. She is our guest instructor today. She's an experienced law professor and law school administrator, expert in all things academic success, has really helped students a lot in various facets of their legal education over the years, including their bar prep and their preparation for this exam, the Mpre. And that's it for announcements. Let's get to the useful stuff. I turn you over to Jennifer.
So hello and welcome. Like Celeste mentioned, I've actually been doing bar stuff for about 15 years now. I'm licensed in California and Nevada, and I know it sounds weird to say this, but I actually love the bar exam. What's great about the bar is that, you're no longer worrying about, what Professor so-and-so thinks about this, that, or the other, policy issue. There's, a way to answer the questions and to be successful. And all you have to do is write to the bar examiners. You don't have to write to a bunch of different professors who might have different things they're trying to work with you on. And the same thing goes for the multiple choice portions of the bar, which includes both, what we normally think of as the multiple choice portion, but also the Mpre. The Mpre is written by the same folks who write the multiple choice portion of the bar and the MPT, the performance test part. And for those of you who are going to be taking the UBE, the Uniform Bar Exam, the NCBE, the National Conference of Bar Examiners, also writes the essay questions. So one of the things that I always tell folks, and this is actually, my very first lecture for BarMax, but one of the things I always tell folks that I'm working with is a great way to figure out whether or not you want to use a company for your bar prep is to try them with the multi-state performance test, right? So BarMax is offering you this opportunity to kind of get a sense of what BarMax has to offer, and you can actually practice that with the Mpre, which is written similarly by the same folks as the multi-state bar exam, the multiple choice portion. So it's a really great way to get a sense of what's on offer and then to have the opportunity to practice it. And that's especially valuable because BarMax actually will give you real released questions. And they're actually less expensive than what it would cost to get them on the National Conference of Bar Examiners website, right? So really great opportunity, not just to prepare for the Mpre, but also to sort of evaluate the product and see if it's a good fit for you. I am just taking a look in the Q&A here, and I want to say that so Carrie has asked, do you know if the Mpre will be offered online next year? That's not clear yet, but you can go to the National Conference of Bar Examiners website, and they have been really good about announcing things regularly. That website is ncbex.org. I'll put that in the chat so that you guys can see it. Oh, Celeste is reading my mind. There's a question, can we highlight or underline the facts? It's offered on, the exam is offered on computer these days. You can do some underlining and highlighting. And then looks like there's some substantive questions, but those are the two questions that I think tie into what I want to talk about first. So let me go ahead and switch over to that. When Celeste came to me and said, hey, could you do this lecture for us? I said, okay, sure. But I don't know, what exactly, where are folks with this? Like, what are they interested in knowing about? Where are folks, drawing their, what's the audience that we would expect to draw from? And she said, hey, it's going to be folks who are taking, the Mpre like tomorrow, and folks who are just beginning their Npre prep. So what I'm hoping to do with today's session would be to just kind of focus on some techniques that I can give you to answer questions, sort of what I would call your worst case survival, like what do you do if you get there and you have no idea what the answer is? And then and that will be useful for those of you who are planning to take it right away and those of you who are planning to take it later on. And then I also want to do a quick little recap of how you can approach the sort of two subjects that I think are probably the most important to study. One of those is going to be client relationships and conflicts, which actually makes up like a quarter to a third of the bar exam, of the Npre exam itself. And then the other is the judicial conduct rules, sometimes called the Judicial Canon. That actually makes up a small portion of the bar exam. But unlike the rest of the rules, which you probably covered in your PR class in school, the judicial canon is generally not covered very well, or if it's covered at all. So that's another area where, although it's only a small portion of the number of questions you're going to get, can be essential to really performing well on the exam. So with that said, I mentioned this before, but it is written by the National Conference of Bar Examiners, same folks who write the MBE portion. You're going to have 60 questions, and you're going to have 2 hours to take the exam. So that's going to shake out to about 2 minutes a question. And that is not, again, not terribly different from what you'll see on the multiple choice portion of the bar exam, where you've got 100 questions and 3 hours to get through them. So just a little bit less time. It is administered on computer by the proctoring company Pearson VUE. There we go. And then if I was you, like the next question that I would want to know is, how is it scored? So it is, as I mentioned, 60 questions. 50 of them are graded, and you're not going to be able to tell which ones are graded and which ones aren't. So you want to answer all 60 questions. Most people do find that the 2 hours is sufficient, although lots of folks are bubbling in answers right up until the last second. And I would recommend, if you do run out of time, just pick a letter and go with it, because you're not going to be, your score doesn't decrease simply because you picked a wrong answer, right? So in other words, they don't penalize you for picking a wrong answer, but they'll only reward you for picking a correct answer. You want to know what the pass rate for your state is. Could be 86 if you're here in California, all the way down to 75, which is the lowest score that any state has in terms of what you need to score on the Npre in order to pass it for that state. You're also going to want to check your pass rate, or I'm sorry, the date of the Npre for your particular state. So California, for example, has no limit, you just have to pass the Npre before you can practice. Nevada says you have to pass the Npre within 3 years of any bar exam, the written, the 2-day, 3-day portion, in order to pass it. So that may play into when you decide you want to take the exam, and whether how many opportunities you may have to take it before you need to redo the bar exam portion. Okay. So the scores are scaled. Don't think of scaling as curving. It's not really curving, but what it is doing is basically it's a sort of statistical or mathematic way to make sure that the Npre is the same amount of difficulty from year to year. And so they're going to look at, sort of where the scores fall, and they're going to scale your score accordingly. So in order to get, let's say an 85 or so, you really only need to get about 60% of your questions correct, right? So if you think back to elementary school, I was just talking with my daughter about this the other day. She's like, well, when is it an A? And it's like, well, 90 to 100 is usually an A. If you're getting 60% correct on, any exam back in elementary school, you're not doing very well. But for the MPRE, because of the scaling, that actually will scale out to an 85, right? So scores can range from 50 to 150, 50 being, the lowest score you can get, again, because of the scaling, and 150 being the highest score you can get, again, because of the scaling, right? So the scaling kind of works to make sure that the scores stay fairly consistent from year to year, right? They try to make sure that the same number of people are getting the same scaled scores from year to year. I am seeing some questions pop up, so I'm just going to look in the Q&A really quickly to see if what's going on here. So Danny is asking, when is it offered and is it online? So the MPRE is offered 3 times a year, usually February, March-ish, August-ish, and then November-ish. The dates vary a little bit. And again, you can check that ncbex.org website to find out exactly when it will be and also to register for the MPRE. Okay, and then let me go to the next piece here. Whoops, there we go. Okay, so what topics are they going to test? What's fair game in terms of things that can be discussed or tested on the MPRE? So the first is going to be the ABA Model Rules of Professional Conduct. Most professional responsibility / ethics professors talk about these a lot. So this part should feel pretty familiar to you, right? That stuff should feel like, hey, I've seen this before. The ABA Model Code of Judicial Conduct would also come into play. And that's sort of the rules that govern judges. Sometimes it's called the Judicial Canon. Sometimes professors will cover this, but if they do, it's usually very, very briefly because, they're worried about getting you out into practice and being, ethical practitioners. And, hey, by the time you get to be a judge, you should have figured this out anyway. But the MPRE tests it. So that is something you want to feel at least fairly comfortable with. And this is how the National Conference actually explains it. They say, controlling constitutional decisions and generally accepted principles established in leading federal and state cases and in procedural and evidentiary rules. So what does that mean? What are they talking about there? So they're talking about things like, when can a defense attorney speak to the press about his or her client and the prosecution's case against that client, right? That's a Supreme Court case that dealt with, speech rights of attorneys within the context of their representation. Or what can attorney commercials look like? Or again, a Supreme Court case. And most of that stuff you've probably talked about in your professional responsibility class as well. And then there's procedural and evidentiary rules. The biggest one here is going to be privilege and work product doctrine and all of that piece of it. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with that stuff as well. And I'm just going to check again for questions in the Q&A. And I should say, I planned this to try to give us some time at the end for questions as well. So if you have questions and you haven't been able to answer them, I'm sorry, if you have questions and I haven't answered them, please let me know. Danny asks again, another great question. Will you give us black letter rules to study from and former MPRE questions to practice? And the answer is BarMax has both. They actually have a really great outline that you can use. They've got all kinds of materials and they're actually using released former questions. So that's all available through BarMax. And I saw somebody earlier had asked about like, where do we access it? And it's actually, if you go into the MPRE part of the website, you can access it that way. And Celeste, are you able to chime in and give some more specific?
Yes, that's exactly right. So if you are on the BarMax website, because you've checked out the BarMax Bar Review, there's in the left-hand menu an open book. And that's where you can change your course. Okay, you can change what you're studying, the course that you're studying from BAR to MPRE. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Just like that. But if you are on your phone or your tablet, then what you'll want to do is actually download the separate app that we have, BarMax Mpre. It's a totally free app, a totally free program. The stuff that Jennifer's showing on the screen right now is also completely free. The only thing we ask you to pay for, we have a free question bank, but the actual practice tests are $24.99 each. And this is a licensing fee. We have to pay NCBE. Now you can go buy those same exams from NCBE for $35-ish, or you can buy them from us for $24.99. Go ahead and do that either through the app, the BarMax Mpre app, which is free, or this website that Jen is showing you now. Yes. I think that's it, right? I'll stop my interruption.
No, I appreciated it because I was like, wait, how do I show them where to get it? So I'm glad that you were able to do that.
But what you put on the screen is beautiful. This little thing here is where it's all about. So
yes, okay. And then the questions are said, are you going to give all the rules? I'm not, because I only have like 45 minutes because I'm trying to save some time at the end for questions, but you can get that in BarMax. What I'm going to try to do today is to give you some tips and tricks for like how to be successful on the exam, highlight 2 areas that I think most students need a little bit more time with. And so for those of you who are taking it tomorrow, it's like a really broad strokes kind of review. If you don't know this stuff, maybe take another look. And for those of you who are planning to take it later on, it'll allow you to kind of structure your study time. Okay, so fair game, rules of professional conduct, judicial canon, leading cases. And then I want to talk for a minute just about like how to game the exam. So see what I did there, like fair game the exam. Ha, dad jokes. Okay, so if you're going to do the questions, what I would suggest would be to start with the call, right? Is it proper for attorney beta to continue to represent deft? And then if you go through and you read the question, and you want to pay attention to anything, any kind of, I'll give you some stuff, some sort of key terms or key things you want to look for in any question you're doing, whether it's an essay or an MBE question or an Mpre question or even an MPT. So anytime you get something that indicates a time, right? And sometimes that's dates, but sometimes it's after this happened or during this time, or here in this question, we have the word while and we have the word shortly. Anytime you have an adjective, an adverb, or an action verb, right? So if they tell you that he ran quickly, they're actually spending 2 words on that. And the the National Conference of Bar Examiners, the NCBEX, has decided that they want to limit the number of words in multiple choice questions. And so if they are deciding to spend 2 words to describe how someone is running, that adjective or adverb is going to be key. I also want you to pay attention to any kind of mental state. And those can be like mental states like we typically think of them, purposely, knowingly, maliciously, but they can also be something like in good faith, or so-and-so was angry, or, excited, right? Any kind of mental state. How is someone thinking or feeling? That's going to be key. And the last thing I want you to pay attention to are grammatical clues, like commas, quotes, exclamation marks, all of those kinds of things. And I'll put that in that list in the chat so you have it when we're done with this question. Okay, so you're going to start with the call and then you're going to read the question looking for those sort of clues, the key clues that will help you figure out what the answer is. So you've got while an assistant district attorney, comma. So just that phrase, we've got a time, while, and we have 2 descriptor terms about attorney, that he's a district attorney and not just a district attorney, but an assistant district attorney. That means it's going to be important that he's an assistant district attorney, comma. Attorney Alpha was in charge of the presentation before a grand jury of evidence that led to an indictment charging 32 defendants. So again, we've got, the numerical descriptor here for defendants, 32. That's going to matter, with conspiracy to sell controlled drugs. Shortly after the grand jury returned the indictments, and we've got a comma, another timeline, shortly, Alpha resigned as an assistant district attorney and became an associate in the law office of Attorney Beta, comma, a sole practitioner. Again, sole describes practitioner. It's going to be important that he's a sole practitioner. At the time of such association, comma, so again, timeline and a comma, it's going to be a big deal. Beta was the attorney for Deft, one of the indicted co-defendants. And notice that description of Deft, right? He's not just a defendant, he's one of the indicted co-defendants. That's going to be important too. So you've got your question there. And then I want you to sort of, if you can, I want you to come up with the answer on your own, right? So what's the issue here? The issue is that Attorney Alpha was the guy who brought the indictment against this defendant. And now he wants to move to a solo practitioner and practitioner office. And can he do that, right? And so maybe we've got a question about like walling him off. Sometimes it's called an ethical wall. Sometimes in older case law, you'll hear it called a Chinese screen. But just this idea of like, can we exclude him? And my initial thought is like, that's going to be pretty hard given that it's a solo practitioner. And we've got this issue of the fact that like attorney is not just an attorney, but an assistant district attorney who brought the indictments in this very matter against this very defendant. Okay, so you're going to kind of think through what is the issue. You're going to recall to mind the rule. Now, in my ideal world, you're going to have the rule memorized. But let's be honest, right? There are just some rules that no matter how long you look at them or how much you try to study them, you're not going to necessarily, be able to cram into your head. That's okay. What I'm going to show you next is kind of what I call the worst case survival. What do you do if you can't remember the rule? For those of you who, you're going to be like studying down the road, you really want to memorize it as much as you can. Those of you who are taking the exam, in the next day or so, you want to memorize as much as you can too, but this is a way to kind of sort of increase the odds you'll get it correct if you have to do it right away, or if you have to guess rather. Okay, so ideally you sort of spot the issue, you recall to mind the rule, you do the analysis, you come to your own conclusion, and then and only then do you look at the answer choices. So sometimes applicants will say, I hate these multiple choice questions. It feels like the bar examiners are trying to trick me. This is awful. And the Mpre is tricky for a reason we'll talk about later, but also because it's tricky in the same way that the MBE is tricky, okay? So I want to show you just one of those tricks you can use to get around that. So the first is, we don't really care about the yes, yes, no, no, okay? Like the end result, the like, why is that going to happen? I mean, when was the last time you heard a law professor say, it really matters if you come to the right answer? Most of the time they say, you could argue it both ways, but I just really want to see your analysis and that you understand the rule. And then also because they can do things like this, where it says no, but then they use an unless, which like negates the no, right? So don't worry too much about the yes if, yes because, no unless, no because. Worry more about this analysis and conclusion, okay? So A is yes if alpha does not reveal to beta any confidence or secret learned while an assistant district attorney. B is yes because a public prosecutor must make timely disclosure to the defense attorney of any exculpatory evidence. No, unless alpha agrees not to participate in the representation of Deft. And D, no, because alpha had substantial responsibility for the indictment of Deft. I know a lot of you may already have the right answer in your mind, but again, like worst case survival if you have to. So I want to talk about answer choice B. And this is tricky in the way that a lot of these questions are tricky. Must make timely disclosure to the defense attorney of any exculpatory evidence. if you haven't already identified what the issue is, if you haven't already thought about what the rule is, you sit there and you go, exculpatory evidence. I mean, that does sound right. I feel like I've heard that before. Brady something something. Should I have thought about that? And now you're rereading the question. Guys, this does not have any application at all, okay? So when you look at this and you know, it's like, it sounds familiar, but does it apply here? I'm not sure it applies here. We start to doubt ourselves, but I want you to know that you know what you need to know for the most part. So you can X out B. Even if you don't, you're like, I don't know. If all you know is, I feel like this is a rule from another area of law, or it doesn't really answer the question that's been raised here, right? We said, even without identifying the rule, that the issue was sort of like, can there be an ethical screen? And then also, you know, does it matter that Alpha was was literally bringing the case against death? This whole thing about disclosure of exculpatory evidence doesn't answer that question. So even if you're not sure what the rule is, you should be able to eliminate B. Then I want to look at A and C. And the first thing that I want you to notice is that both of these are trying to talk about the idea of an exculpatory, there we go. My Alexa wants to answer this question too. So, okay, so both A and C are trying to talk about an ethical wall. And just from sort of process of elimination, if you have two answers that are basically saying the same thing, neither one of them can be correct, okay? The other way that you can tell that A and C are not 100% correct is that neither of them completely explains what's required for a proper ethical wall, okay? So just through sort of backing it up, worst case survival, you could hopefully get to B. But one of the things I said in the very beginning was, I want you to memorize the rule. That's the ideal thing, is to memorize the rule. So this is actually lifted from page 20 of the outline, right? So if I went to, and I'll show you where it is, if I go to, you know, the all subjects for the Mpre by clicking on the little book over here, and I go here, and I go to conflicts of interest and confidentiality and all that, you're going to find it on page 20 of the piece here. Okay, and then let me go back to thingy. Okay, so this is the language of the from the BarMax outline. You can also use the language of the rule itself if that's easier for you. You can put the rule in your own words. It doesn't really matter, but you want to sort of memorize it. So it talks about the idea of a former government lawyer or judge. And remember, we said that the fact that they spent all of those words telling us that Alpha is an assistant district attorney is going to mean that the fact he's an assistant district attorney is important. Hey, former government lawyer or judge. That's why it matters, right? So if a lawyer is employed by a firm and has confidential information regarding a government matter obtained through previous representation of the government, the firm can properly represent another client against the government if the following requirements are satisfied. 1, ethical wall, 2, no sharing in fees, and 3, written notice. So again, if we look at, there we go. If we look at A and C, right, neither one gives us the complete rule. So neither can be the correct answer. But I also want you to look at, you know, we talked about the key terms. If you look at the word here, another client, right? Deft is not another client. Deft is the client, right? This is not, you know, a previous case or even a similar, you know, case, but different. He is one of the 32 co-indicted or indicted co-felons, right? Co-defendants. There we go. So by really focusing on memorizing, and you can use those same techniques of like, hey, what are my key terms? When you look at rules, as well as when you look at, you know, the fact patterns. I'm going to check the Q&A here. So the answer to black letter rules, yes, it's on the website. Do I know if in the state of Virginia you can take the bar exam without law school? So I don't know for certain, but I will tell you I'm pretty sure that California is the only state that lets you do that. And I will tell you that you can find the answer either by going to the National Conference of Bar Examiners website, the ncbex.org, and then going to their state-by-state guide of bar exam requirements, or you can go to the state of Virginia's bar exam examiner's webpage, and they will also have that information. This person says, I have BarMax, but the OPE2 isn't accessible. That might be something that we can figure out through getting one of the tech folks to answer that question for you. What is the difference between the free Mpre questions included in the free Mpre program in BarMax and the paid questions offered by BarMax? Great question. So that $25 or $24.99, slightly less than $25 or whatever, is designed to be taken like an exam. Okay, under exam conditions, this is an opportunity to see how would I do on the actual exam, right? If your client asks you to put a client's friend whom you know will testify falsely, must you as the attorney put the friend on the stand? I know you must put the client on the stand, even if you know. So, Sean, I think what I would say about that is that, you would want to focus on I would sort of think through the rule like step by step, right? So the rule is that the attorney governs strategy and also has a duty to not offer likely perjured testimony to the tribunal. So for those two reasons, I would say, no, you don't have to do that. I would also say, notice that question gives you two different rules that you could raise, right? So as you move through these Mpre questions, if you get to an answer that says, like no, you want to make sure that either one of those rules is referenced, right? Question about elaborating on discovery of work product. If I have time at the end, I'll do that, but otherwise, you can definitely take a look at the free materials that BarMax offers. How many questions do you have to pass out of the 15 questions to 50 questions to get an 86 score in California? So I would again encourage you to think of it as 60 questions, because you're not going to know which are the 50 that are graded and which are the 50 that are not. And you want to, for California, you want to be at about 60%, 61% correct, right? So that's going to mean that you basically need to be getting slightly over, like, what is that, like 40 something questions correct in order to get the required score. Okay. All right. And Daja asks, can we hold the questions? That's, yeah, I can do that. That's fine. I did want to give you the keywords to look for. So I'll put those here. And those are going to be adjectives, adverbs, and action verbs. So here, the adjective, another client in the rule was really important. Anything that gives you a time frame, right? So in our question, we had shortly, we had while he was a district attorney, at the same time as representing, beta is representing deft, all of that piece of it. You want to think about mental or emotional states. So sometimes, that's really clear. It's like, hey, they purposely did it or they maliciously did it. But sometimes it's they were angry or they were upset or they did it, in good faith or whatever it might be. And then I want you to think about your grammar clues like quotes or exclamation points or commas, okay? So if you think about those things, that will help. And that'll help you as you go through essay questions and also as you go through multiple choice questions and also as you look at rules. Okay, So I said one way that they trick you is kind of by, hey, here's a random rule of law that's correct. You have to just turn over exculpatory materials, but doesn't necessarily apply to this scenario. And so it's like confusing and what's happening. Or they give you part of a rule, like an A and B, or A and C in that question we just looked at. But here's the other thing that is unique to the Npre and that makes it very different and requires sort of a paradigm shift. And that is that in law school, you are likely to focus on, what do you need to do to be an ethical attorney? What does it mean to be the kind of attorney who's upholding professional conduct? What does that look like? But when you get to the Npre, you're being tested on where the rule is. Where's the, which side do you fall on? Where's the line, right? So, your PR professor is like, well, here's the rule, but you really should be here. And so, a lot of us are, oh, well, I want to be an ethical attorney, so I'm definitely going to be here. But the exam is testing, here's the Npre rule, right? Like, here's the law. Here's where you actually have to be. And then there's like the bad guy answer, right? The like Better Call Saul, sleazy lawyer, trickster guy, like whatever's happening. So you have to have that paradigm shift, not just to like where should you be, but where do you have to be? And when you look at the questions, many times there's going to be an answer choice that is the where should you be, or the goody two shoes answer, or the like lawyer that you're going to be when you're out in practice. And then there's also just the clearly wrong, sleazy lawyer answer that just it doesn't apply, right? And you can oftentimes eliminate those two answers. And if you have to guess, you've now increased your chances of getting it correct, to 1 out of 2, right? 50%. Okay, the two things I want you to focus on, and I mentioned this before, but attorney-client relationships and conflicts, which are treated as two separate areas by the National Conference in their outline, and is further broken down in the BarMax review because it's sort of meant to be like sort of easily digestible chunks of information. But I'm putting it together because a lot of times these issues appear together in a question, right? So you might have a question about like, hey, what does it look like to be whether or not somebody is a client, and then if they are, is there a potential conflict? And so those things can come together in a question. It's going to make up 22 to 34% of your of the questions that you're going to have. So just in terms of, oh my gosh, the exam's coming up, what do I absolutely have to know? Attorney-client relationship conflicts going to be like one of the top things. And then, as I mentioned before, judicial conduct, simply because many of you will not have seen this until now, right? Your professors probably didn't spend a lot of time on it in law school. So I don't have time to go into every substantive area of law, but I wanted to give you some tricks or techniques that you could use to sort of navigate these questions. So the first question that you want to ask yourself, if you're looking at one of those questions, think back to the one we just looked at about whether, alpha was representing the government and beta was representing defendant, like all that. Your first question is this person in the problem a client or a former client? And so there's the obvious part there, right? Of like, there are different rules for former clients versus current clients, but then there are also questions about, is this person either of these at all, right? Okay. Then you want to look at, did this attorney represent this person, or were they the opposing counsel? Were they the counsel for the opposing party, right? Are they directly involved in this litigation, right? And then you want to look at, was it on this matter? If they didn't necessarily represent this person, but they may have done something that was similarly raised, can the attorney be walled off, right? So maybe you have an attorney who worked at firm A, helping husband and wife draft their wills, and now he's moved over to firm B, and wife, a former client, comes in and wants help with a divorce. It's a new matter, and then the question is, okay, can we just wall them off because attorney likely has confidential information that he acquired during the course of helping husband and wife develop their wills. Remember that you're going to have unique rules for government attorneys, so you want to make sure that you consider whether or not somebody represents the government. And the last thing I want you to look for is this a client that can be consented away, right? Remember that that written consent can make up for a whole world of potential conflicts. That said, the one thing you can't do is go from party A to party B in the same matter as the attorney, right? That's something you can't consent away. All right. So those are just some questions to ask yourself as you look at that sort of conflict/attorney-client relationship. So judicial conduct has quite a few parts to it, different topics within it. But I would say the thing that comes up the most is the idea of being impartial and appearing impartial, right? So the judge has to both be impartial and appear impartial. So one of the things that you're going to do, one of the reasons it's so important to practice using questions that have been released were actual test questions from the National Conference of Bar Examiners, is that as you study, you're not just learning the law, you're learning how the law is tested. So it matters like whether the bar examiners would believe that this is the sort of thing that affects the judge's ability to appear impartial. So, sometimes applicants can get so frustrated because you're like, well, of course, the judge can't, donate to the cause of her husband's, alma mater that could appear in her courtroom. That looks super, shifty. She shouldn't do that. And again, so remember, it's not the judge here that, where you should be, it's where do you have to be. So you got to shift your paradigm a little bit. But then it's also learning whether the bar examiners would feel that whether they think that it is impartial. And so as you're doing the questions, if you start to run up against that and you're like, oh my gracious, I don't know whether they look impartial to me, but their bar examiners are saying they're not, you may just want to keep a list. And you can actually do sort of a T-chart, right? Where on one side you have your particular issue or conclusion, and on this side you have your facts, right? So donating to husband's alma mater, oh no, wait, that's the facts. Donating to husband's alma mater is on this side, and then on this other side is, not partial, right? Still impartial or whatever. But some tips and techniques to sort of do this just sort of off the bat to approach it. Look at what is the closeness between the judge and the alleged impropriety. So is this like the judge herself? Is this the judge's spouse? Is this the judge's spouse's cousin, right? The more people we have in between, the less likely it is to appear to be partial. You can look at how entrenched the judge and the impropriety are, right? Has this happened a bunch of times? Is it a lot of money? Is it, a matter that's appearing in front of the judge herself, or is it a matter that could appear in front of her? All of those things can help guide you through that impartiality. But make no mistake, there's no substitute for practicing with those real questions and getting a sense of what the bar examiners think makes you partial or impartial. So I want to do this question really quick, and then we will be able to talk about, I'll be able to answer whatever questions I can. So we would start with, reading the call. Is it proper for the judge to accept the gift of the portrait? And so right away, I know this is a question where I have to switch my brain over to the Judicial Canon, and it's going to be about gifting of a portrait. So gifting kind of makes me think, is this going to be a problem with like appearing to be partial? Like, what's the deal with this? Judge is a judge of the trial court in city. Judge has served for many years. So the fact, again, we've got a descriptor there, many years, and it's a time frame, years, as a director of a charitable organization that maintains a camp for disadvantaged children. The organization has never been involved in litigation. Judge has not received any compensation for her services. So notice all of those descriptors. They tell us twice that this is sort of, like a camp that's designed to benefit the community because it's charitable. and it's for disadvantaged children. They tell us that the organization has never been involved in litigation, so that's a time frame. And then the whole any compensation. So not only she not received compensation, but any compensation at all. The charity has decided to sponsor a public testimonial dinner in judge's honor. Now you might be thinking, what the heck is a public testimonial dinner, right? Like, I don't know what that means. But worst comes to worst, you're gonna make your best guess, right? Like just make your best guess. But we know it's important because it says public testimonial dinner. And basically what it is that they're doing this dinner, and it's like, gonna be, sort of this idea of like, this is everything judge has done for us the organization. As part of the occasion, comma, so we've got our sort of time frame and we've got that demarcation of a comma, the local bar association intends, so we've got a mental state, to commission and present to judge her portrait at a cost of $4,000. The money to pay for the portrait will come from a public testimonial fund, so that's in quotes, that exact language is going to matter, and it's the second time it's appearing because we had public testimonial dinner, that will be raised by the City Bar Association from contributions of lawyers who are members of the association and who practice in the courts of city. So notice that there's sort of some different layers here, right? So we said one thing we can look at is sort of where are we, right? Like, is this the judge herself? Is this the judge's spouse? Is this the judge's spouse's job? Like, what is this? So we're going from judge to organization to City Bar Association to lawyers, right? Who practice in the courts somewhere, right? Okay, is it proper for judge to accept the gift of the portrait? Remember, we don't necessarily care about this yes, yes, no, no, and we're gonna focus on the reasoning. So question C, we can get rid of right away. No, because the cost of the gift exceeds $1,000. Like, no, that doesn't matter. We don't care. Why are we throwing this random thing in? And if you looked at that and you were like, oh gosh, I don't know, is that a rule? I don't know that rule. I probably need to go read it again. Trust yourself, right? They're trying to trick you. So we're gonna cross that off. And then we've got, yes, because the gift is incident to a public testimonial for judge. Yes, because judge did not receive compensation for her services to a charitable organization. Or no, because the funds for the gift are contributed by lawyers who practice in the courts of city. So the first thing that we could say would be B, yes, because judge did not receive compensation for her services to the charitable organization. That's true, but it doesn't really have any bearing on except the gift of the portrait. Unless you were trying to think that, well, she wasn't previously compensated, so this is basically a compensation, but that might actually get judge into more trouble, right? Like now she's like representing this organization, charitable organization, because they painted her portrait, like, So let's get rid of B. And then if we look at C, no, because the funds for the gift are contributed by lawyers who practice in the courts of city is sort of the goody two-shoes answer, right? It's the like, well, the lawyers donate to the City Bar Association, which is doing this fund, which organization will use to benefit judge by her portrait. And that's not necessarily required, right? So we can get rid of that answer. The other thing that might tell you that A is the correct answer is the whole because the gift is incident to a public testimonial for judge, which could also go in there, okay? So here are a few other things about MBE and the Mpre and everything that BarMax offers. I will let Celeste chime in with that in a moment, but I did want to go through and check the questions here. How much time should we allocate to study for the Mpre? So that really depends. If you are someone who can allocate, if you're someone who can memorize the rules really quickly, or you feel that hey, I basically have a really good foundation in this, I'm good, it'll be okay, then you may need less time. But what I would say is, in terms of figuring out how much time you need enough time to make sure you have your rules memorized and enough time to do as many questions as you can, okay? So for some people, that's a week. Other folks that may be, a little more than that. Some folks are like, hey, I can do a weekend. It's also going to depend on what your situation is like. So if you're, you live by yourself, there are no distractions, and you can study for, 25 hours in a weekend, that may be perfect for you. But if you are somebody who's working, or you've got, other family obligations, caretaking duties, and you don't have, a weekend for you is really going to be, maybe, 4 hours on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday, you may need more time throughout the week. More questions about scaling. Is it fair to say that it is about 5 points each? It's hard to tell because of the scaling. What I would do, Sean, rather than like trying to figure out like exactly where do I need to be, would be to go in, do as many as you can, questions as you can beforehand, and as you're practicing, try to make sure you're above that 60% mark. And as long as you are, you should be relatively safe. That should be, hopefully that will be helpful. And then the question of answer choice. Okay, let me go back for David and Michelle. Let me go back, and yes, Marie, let me go back to the question and show you what I mean. How do I, okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, so this is the one with the attorney who's he was representing the city, and now he's gonna represent, can he go work for B, who represents defendant? And yes, the answer is gonna be D. Michelle says, if they have a yes and a no with the same answer, it can't be either one. Why is that? So again, I would suggest, don't necessarily worry about the yes, yes, no, no. But if when you look at the facts, you see that they're basically referencing the same rule, neither one can be correct, right? So if the rule is like, hey, can you be ethically walled off? And both A and B deal with whether you can be ethically walled off, neither one is likely to be correct, right? Unless one is like a much better, like includes all the parts of the rule. And so, part one, well, actually this is okay. So if we look at the rule, there we go. Neither A nor C gives you the complete rule, right? Neither mentions no sharing of fees. Neither mentions written notice. There's this question of what is an ethical wall that also would need to be thoroughly explained in those answers for them to be correct. So what I'm really saying is worry more about the reasoning than the conclusion, partly because, look, this no unless is really a yes if only, right? So if I decide like, oh no, this is bad, and I just get rid of the yeses, maybe it's yes, but only if there's an ethical wall and they don't share in fees and there's a written agreement, right? Something like that. For the at the wall question, I will, if you would like to talk about that afterwards, I'm happy to do that. How long does it take to receive your results after taking it? Usually about 8 weeks, but COVID, things may be up in the air. You can check the National Conference of Bar Examiners website and they will have that information. I have 6 months between the end of law school and taking the February 2022 bar exam. How much time? So again, like that's going to depend a little bit on your life. Most folks who are going to take the February bar exam are taking at least 2 months. If you're working, you may want to take, sort of do smaller chunks of study over a longer period. Some folks are like, hey, I'm going to do sort of an overview in November, but during December, things get hectic. I'll pick it back up in January. So you really want to kind of look for a way to individualize that sort of time to yourself and your study. Can you go over the best strategies for guessing again? Yeah, okay. So we talked a little bit about the hey, make sure you focus on the reasoning and not the conclusion. We talked about getting rid of like random rules that even if you don't know what the rule is for this question, right? We know the issue is he's a government lawyer who was representing the government against this defendant. So even if I don't know what the rule is, I know that whatever answer choice here has to answer that question. So I can get rid of this whole Brady material. Same thing with our judge question. Like randomly, it says, hey, as long as it's a gift, or no, because it's a gift of more than $1,000. That's not a thing, right? So we can get rid of that. So those are some ways to increase your chances of success if you're guessing. And the better call Saul kind of thing. I think one of the things that's really frustrating for applicants is, in law school, your professor is telling you what you should do, and that's what you're talking about, and that's what you're reading in the cases, and that's kind of what you're thinking about, right? But what the Mpre is testing is, what do you have to do? Where's the line, right? So, you might have an answer where there's something that's like, this is what the best, most ethical attorney would do. Then you have an answer that is like, the worst, better call Saul, like sleazy, slimy lawyer, like what is happening here? And then there's sort of an answer in the middle where the sort of boundary of the rule is found. And that's where you want to go. So if you have to guess, you can also get rid of, the goody two shoes answer and the kind of better call Saul answer. Okay. How many times should I cycle through the program before the February bar? I would say that you want to cycle through the program. And again, it's super frustrating because it's individual, right? So I would say at least once. I would say that you want to do all the questions you can. And I would say once you've done those two things, if you have time left, you want to make sure that you have memorized let me back up. So you're going to go through everything. You're going to do the questions. You're going to memorize as best you can. And then if you're finding that like, hey, I'm still missing, a ton of, attorney-client questions, that may be something you want to spend more time on because it's a more heavily tested area. And Sean has great advice here saying, hey, don't forget the work product because there's tricky questions on that. Yep. So thinking about like what is tricky, what do you feel confident in from law school or from that initial review? How are you doing on particular types of questions? How likely is it to be tested? Kind of balancing all of those factors to decide how you want to answer the question. I want to go up and sort of talk about Laura's question here, which is, I remember there was a question where a judge goes to a party with other judges and prosecutors who appear before him. So notice that, right? Appear before him. That's a description. Whoops, where'd you go, Laura? Well, any case, the judges, they appear before him and they give him a gift of wine. Should he have done that? Why or why not? Notice, so one of the things we said to look at is like, how close is the lawyer or the judge and the potential like thing that might make them partial, right? So on what would concern me about this is the judge is at a party with people who appear in front of him and they're giving him a gift. So there might be, you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's only a bottle of wine, I don't know. But the sort of closeness there would make me concerned. How early can we book the bar exam? So you will want to go onto the bar. Oh my gracious! So the answer is going to be you can go in and register. I want to say it's like 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time. But you would want to, I would say, because of COVID and everything's up in the air, I would say go directly to the source, go to the Mpre the National Conference of Bar Examiners website, go to the exams, click on Mpre and follow the instructions that are there. They're actually really good about updating that site and letting you know, hey, this is what we're doing now or whatever. So let's say answer choice A said no unless it's timely screened, said Ooh, I love this question, you guys. This is such a great question. Okay, so answer choice A says no unless alpha is timely screened, and answer choice C said yes if no fees are apportioned to alpha. D would still be the best answer correct. And Anonymous, I so wish you had put your name on that so I could ask you to like explain what you were thinking. But the reason that I love it, the reason that this thinking is so good is you've picked up on one of the things they do that is a little tricky, right? So yeah, D would still be the best answer because neither A nor C give you the complete rule, right? So it's not enough to just be timely screened, and it's not enough to just not get your fees. You have to have the complete rule there, right? Sometimes, so again, this is sort of guessing, right? If there were something in the fact pattern that meant that this issue of fee sharing was not at issue, then maybe your rule statement doesn't have to, or your conclusion / rule doesn't necessarily have to have that piece in it, right? So if in the fact pattern it said, but C, but alpha has agreed not to take any fees from this case, when we look at those three things you have to do, you still have to have the ethical wall, still have to have the consent. And hey, by the way, the very beginning of the rule tells us if it has to be another client. It can't be that particular client. What exactly is work product? Yeah, so work product is going to be anything that the attorney prepares in anticipation of litigation, okay? And yeah, it would include your opinions, your own notes, anything like that. Okay, yeah, Sarkis, like great thing, I love that. I always get stuck between the two, even with the memorization of the rules. Yeah, and it's tricky. Again, Sarkis, I love that you asked that question because I'm hoping that that's like a light bulb moment for you where you're like, wait, the whole rule has to be there. So yeah, that's such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. Celeste, do you mind showing how to access the purchase? There's questions like, how do I access the purchased questions? How,
let's do that. Can I share my iPad screen?
Yeah, so I think I do stop share.
What I have to do is put share content, and I think you have to allow me to, but I don't know. Let's see. Is my screen up yet? Share, start broadcast, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, it's gonna work.
Okay, good.
Here I am. So I'm in BarMax, and here I'm gonna go to my profile on the left. Okay, so this is the BarMax app, like it would appear on your tablet or phone. On the left menu, those little 3 lines in the upper left-hand corner, I've opened the left menu. I click my gorgeous picture for my profile. And then I click my state, which is randomly Minnesota right now. I'll keep it Minnesota. Okay, so I'm a Minnesota student. Let's say hello. I've had Minnesota students. Why not? And I can either pick the UBE course or the Npre course right here. So I just picked the Npre course, and voila, here I am. Regulation, lawyer-client relationship, conflicts of interest, Okay, all the way down to judicial conduct. If I want the Npre questions, oh my goodness, how did I do that? Sorry. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little filter. It looks like a thumbtack, but it's supposed to be a filter, okay? Work with me here. All right, it's a filter, and it filters us to just the Npre questions. So I can go to the full course, I can go to lectures, flashcards, or the multiple choice questions. These are the free ones, 158. So if you are taking an exam that's a few months in the future, you have time to work through all these slowly with the rule open in front of you so that you can figure out the rule with the facts side by side. It's just a great way to study. And then when you are getting closer to your exam, like tomorrow, if you want to do practice exams for pacing, You can either use some free questions and time yourself, okay? I'm not, or you can buy the practice exams right here. And oh, it turns out that I would need to, purchase those separately. One more thing, if you go into the full course and you're trying to play the lecture, client confidentiality, weren't we just talking about that? And I want to play the lecture, I would actually have to download it. Okay, and it's going to take a little while to download. But that's it. It's playing now. I just have my thing on silent. So that's the whole deal. If you want to do the same thing within the BarMax website, okay, so if I'm in my browser, oh, I'm not in the, yeah, I am. I'm in BarMax right now. I'm in the website. Over here on the left, I have a little book. Okay, you see that? It's below where you submit your essays for grading. By the way, the little clock is where all the past office hours and webinars are. So if you have BarMax, you can watch lots and lots of me and other people explaining the whole bar exam. Not teaching the content. The course teaches the content, but we give you lots of tips like Jennifer did today. And so anyway, in the open book, again, I can choose, oh, well, it kicked me out. I haven't signed in a while. But anyway, I can choose my course. You get the idea. So that's all you need of me, I think. So again, if you have trouble doing any of that, reach out to BarMax support. You can, on our website, you click the support link or you call the support number. And so, Kieran, I hope that answers your question about how to get the app. I thought it was a separate app, and here I was as the representative BarMax telling you wrong, and now I've told you right. Okay, you just go to your state and change your course. So, Jennifer, you want to just keep taking some Q&A from here?
Sure.
I mean, we're at an hour and 40 minutes, so if there's more where you feel like you can help people, we could go a little longer, or we can just wish people luck.
There's definitely like one thing that it occurs to me, which is I do want to show you guys how to sort of navigate the National Conference of Bar Examiners website, because it can be a little bit tricky. So let me show you how to do that. So, okay. This is just the National Conference of Bar Examiners, so it's just ncbex.org. And they do, in addition to sort of writing the exams, many of the exams, they also do a great job of sort of compiling information, right? National information about national pass rates for various jurisdictions. Somebody had said, hey, well, what about like entering in Virginia? Can I do that without going to law school? You can go to the Bar Admission Guide and it will give you the whole a discussion of that. It'll explain, like, in such and such state, like for New Mexico, for example, New Mexico is a uniform bar exam state, but you also have to do, I think it's a 2 or 4 hour, attend a 2 or 4 hour lecture on New Mexico specific law, right? So the Bar Admission Guide gives you all 50 states plus the territories and all that, and talks about like how you can get admitted to the bar there. We talked about the Mpre, and like a lot of folks were like, hey, how long does it take? And how do I register? And what if I need other things? So here's all of that information, right? So registration information, what about applying for accommodations? And hey, by the way, sometimes the exams are on a Friday or a Saturday and people for religious reasons can't take the exam on that day. That's also a kind of accommodation. So accommodations, obviously, for anybody who needs them due to a disability, but also for folks who may not be able to take the exam on a particular day for religious reasons. Their ideas about how to prepare, what does the format look like? What's the subject matter? All of that kind of thing. Here's where you can buy their study aids, although you can get them for less through BarMax. The free sample test questions, I want to say there's like 14 or 15 for free through the national conference, right? So again, you're here, you may as well look at the BarMax free questions. They're also from released questions from the National Conference of Bar Examiners. Folks were saying, hey, well, what about, if I, where do I go? Do I bring my laptop? Whatever it is. So all of those kinds of questions are going to be answered here. It'll explain exactly what you need to do and how you can, take notes or do, marking or whatever you need to do. So lots of those questions are answered right here. I will also say, if you have something that's not answered through the website, many times they are relatively good about responding to calls and emails. So sometimes, if you don't see your answer here, you may be able to reach them that way. Okay, let me see about, so Kieran got that question answered. Would not being able to take the exam in person because of the current travel ban count as an accommodation? That's a good question, and I'm going to direct you right to the source, and I'm going to say, go to the national conference, and I would ask them, like, hey, what's the rule for this? My guess would be that they would say, hey, and they do try to do the test located through in all kinds of places, right? So like it's not just in, so for example, in Nevada, it's not just in Las Vegas, it's also in Reno. In California, it's not just in San Francisco and Los Angeles. There's also a testing center in, I want to say, Chico or Redding, and just all throughout the state, basically. So I suspect you probably would be able to get to where you need to be, but if not, I would give them a call and just say, hey, what's the deal with that? License questions. So Sean, so this is getting kind of down in the weeds here, but I will say, there can be an so attorney work product is privileged, right? It is protected. There is an exception, which you've identified, this undue burden, and there's no other way to gain the info. So an example of that might be that the attorney goes out and interviews a key witness in an automobile accident, and then that witness dies. And the other attorney is like, I can't depose the guy. I don't know what he saw. I don't know what he didn't see. I have no other way to get it. And, the judge might say, yeah, this would be something that could be revealed. But again, it's a pretty high bar, all of that. What if I destroy the work product while in litigation? So I have to admit, I'm not sure. I don't know that I've seen that particular question before, but my gut says don't destroy it. And just in terms of like, hey, I have this question, and both for this question, but also for those of you who are sitting here thinking like, okay, I have a question that I haven't asked and I want, an answer to it, and how do I find the answer later on or whatever. You can go through the BarMax. It's so the stuff that Celeste just showed you, it's actually organized by topic. So really easy to kind of find what you need in to answer that question in the BarMax app. And that is asking if I will review more sample questions today. I'm not. So, but you might be able to find more information through the office hours or the past webinars, which is under that clock piece that Celeste just showed you. Carrie says, wait, Jen, I'm actually in England. Yeah, okay, there's probably not one in England, but maybe there is. I would give them, honestly, Carrie, I would give them a call and just see what they say.
All right. Jennifer, you're doing phenomenal. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think, before we wrap up, did you want to answer a couple more Q&A? Because I have one more big announcement at the end, or?
I think we've covered everything.
Okay.
If anybody has a burning question that I haven't covered, please.
They can actually use, so the BarMax website is testmaxprep.com/bar-exam, or you can just search for us on Google. You'll find us, BarMax Test Prep, right? testmaxprep.com/bar-exam is where you'll get us. And if you are on our website or in our app or any of our products and you click support and send a question shortly here, like soon, then say that it's a content question, and hopefully I can get it within the next couple hours and send it over to Jennifer, and we can get you an answer. But hopefully a BarMax test prep, just Google gets you there. So hopefully that'll get you your answer. I want to thank you guys. You've been a really, really active and engaged webinar audience, making the online experience exciting as always. And Jennifer, I just want to thank you again for just bringing your experience and insight into this exam and doing a phenomenal job here today. And I wish everyone taking the exam tomorrow and in the future great luck and a wonderful legal career. Take care. Bye-bye.